In the Ozark hills, August heat could make porch nails sweat. But the black walnut door at the end of the Vale house stayed cold. Not cool. Cold. Cold enough that Maribel pulled her hand back the first time she touched it, like the wood had answered her. Every other door in that house was cheap pine, painted cream, warped from weather and years of damp. Bedroom doors, pantry door, the narrow door to the stairwell. But this one was different. Black walnut, heavy, unpainted, set deep into the wall with iron hinges wide as a man's thumb. Below the knob was a skeleton keyhole rubbed smooth around the edges, the kind of smooth that only comes from one person using the same key over and over, year after year. Nobody in Birch Creek had opened that door in 16 years. Not the county man, not the auctioneer, not Calvin Rusk, who held the trustee papers in a shoebox under the counter at his general store, and not Henry Vale, who built the door himself after the house was already standing, then spent the last part of his life pretending the room behind it did not exist. That is what people said later, that Henry had locked grief in there, that the room had waited, that a house can hold its breath longer than any living person can. But on the day Maribel came up the dirt track with a cracked suitcase in one hand and $3 in her sock, she did not know any of that. She only knew she had been thrown away before noon. And by sundown, she owned a house with one room that already knew her name. It began with a jar of peaches. Not a broken window, not stolen money, not a screaming fight that would have made sense to anyone watching. A jar of peaches. Mara had taken it from the pantry shelf, wiped the dust off the lid, and set it on the kitchen table. Audrey Bell came in from the back porch, saw the jar, and said there was a crack in the glass. There wasn't. Mara looked, because she always looked. 16 years under Audrey Bell's roof had trained her eyes to search for the crime before the sentence came down. No crack. But Audrey held the jar up to the window anyway, turning it slowly in the light like evidence. "You ruin what you touch," she said. That was all. By 11:30, Mara's suitcase landed in the road, then her school books, then a paper sack with 2 dresses, a hairbrush, and the tin of money she'd kept under a loose board in the closet. Audrey did not come outside. She stood behind the upstairs curtain and watched Mara gather herself out of the dust. Mara was 17, tall for her age, narrow in the shoulders, brown hair cut blunt at her chin, because Audrey said long hair made poor girls vain. She wore a faded yellow blouse and canvas shoes with the rubber peeling at one heel. Her father had been dead 12 years. Jonah Bell died at the mill when a belt snapped and the blade took him down before anyone could reach the shutoff. Mara was 5, old enough to remember the smell of cedar shavings on his sleeves, too young to remember exactly what his voice sounded like. After that, Audrey kept her. Kept was the word. Not raised, not loved. Kept. Kept fed. Kept dressed. Kept useful. Kept reminded that whatever roof she slept under had been mercy. So when the curtain dropped back into place and the front door locked from the inside, Mara did not knock. She counted her money in the ditch. $53.20. That was every babysitting quarter, every egg delivery nickel, every folded dollar from cleaning the church basement after Wednesday suppers. $53.20. Enough to leave Birch Creek if she walked careful, not enough to become anyone new. The road out of town forked by the old feed mill. Left went back toward Main Street, past the church, past the school, past Audrey's house where everybody already knew Mara as the girl nobody could quite explain. Right went toward the ridges, past abandoned tobacco fields, past rusted cattle gates, past hollows where the trees grew so close the road seemed to disappear into them. Mara turned right. By 3 o'clock, the sun had burned the road white. The paper sacks cut into her fingers. Her suitcase thumped against her leg. Cicadas screamed from the trees like the whole world was made of hot wire. That was when she saw the sign. It leaned against a fence post, half swallowed by Johnson grass. Vale Place transfer through Calvin Rusk, Birch Creek, General. The paint had faded to the color of old bone. Behind the sign, a track ran between two walls of blackberry cane and vanished over a rise. Mara stopped. She could see only the roof from the road, a gray roof, sagging slightly in the middle, with a chimney still standing straight. For reasons she could not have explained, that straight chimney made her turn around and walk back to town. Calvin Rusk had run the Birch Creek General Store since before anyone trusted him to run anything. He was 72, barrel-chested, and bald except for a white horseshoe of hair that stuck out over his ears when the humidity was bad. He sold lamp oil, feed nails, aspirin, flour, tobacco, and gossip, though he never admitted to selling the last one. When Mara came in carrying everything she owned, the bell over the door made one tired sound. Calvin looked up. Then he looked down at the suitcase. Then he looked at her face and stopped pretending this was an ordinary afternoon. "Audrey put you out," he said. Mara set the suitcase beside the counter. "The Vale Place," she said. "How much?" Calvin took off his glasses. "No." "How much?" "That house isn't for a girl with one suitcase." I asked how much. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Henry Vale died 4 summers ago. No will anybody could prove. No living kin that answered county letters. Taxes got paid out of what little was left in his bank account, until there wasn't little left. County wants it off the books." "How much?" "The transfer fee is $50. Mara felt the number strike her chest. 50. She had $53.20. Calvin saw her face change. It was not hope. Hope was softer. This was arithmetic. He leaned both hands on the counter. "Listen to me. No electric. Well pump stubborn. Roof leaks over the north bedroom. Kitchen stove smokes if the wind comes wrong. The place comes with 7 half-wild hens and no guarantees. And there's a locked room on the back hall I don't have a key for." "A locked room?" "A room Henry built that door for. Black walnut. Big iron hinges. He told me once to leave it be if he went first. I left it be." "What's inside?" "If I knew, it wouldn't be locked." Mara looked toward the store window, where the heat outside bent the road into silver. "I have $53, she said. "If I buy food, I have nowhere to sleep. If I buy sleep, I have no food. So tell me which part of that sounds like I can afford to be afraid of a door." Calvin held her gaze for a long time. Then he went behind the tobacco cabinet, lifted a shoebox from a shelf, and set it on the counter. Inside were papers, a brass house key, and a smaller envelope yellowed along the flap. "Sign here," he said quietly. She signed. Mara Bell. Her handwriting looked steadier than she felt. Calvin took $50 and acted like it hurt him to touch it. Then he slid the brass key across the counter with 2 cans of beans, a loaf of day-old bread, a box of matches, and a paper bag of coffee grounds. "I can't sell you those," he said. "Stock's too old." "They look fine." "Too old," he repeated. "Store policy." Mara closed her fingers around the key. It was warm from his palm. "Mr. Rusk." "Why did Henry Vale lock the room?" Calvin's face changed. "Not much. Just enough." "He had a daughter," he said. Then he put the shoebox away and would not say anything else. The Vale place was farther from the road than it looked. The track climbed once, dipped into shade, crossed a dry creek bed full of pale stones, then rose again between cedars. When the house finally appeared, Mara stopped in the yard and forgot the weight of the suitcase. It was not pretty. The porch leaned. The paint had gone from white to gray. Honeysuckle climbed the south wall and had already claimed 1 second-floor window. The barn behind the house had a broken roof beam, and the smokehouse door hung open like a mouth. But the house was real. 2 stories, wide porch, stone foundation, 4 square windows on the front, a kitchenelle out back, a springhouse at the edge of the yard where cold water ran even in August, and the hens were real too. 7 brown hens scratched under the lilac bushes like old women searching for dropped pins. One of them marched straight toward Mara, looked at her shoes, and made a sound that seemed almost disappointed. "I know," Mara said. "Me too." The front door stuck, then opened with a scrape. The house smelled shut. Dust, cedar, mouse, ash in an old stove. Something dry and floral beneath it all, like lavender that had stopped trying years ago. Mara walked room to room. Front room with a stone fireplace and a moth-eaten chair. Dining room with a long table and 6 mismatched chairs. Kitchen with a black iron stove, a sink pump, blue jars lined on the windowsill, and a calendar from 1968 still pinned to the wall. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a narrow sewing room full of empty thread spools. Then she came down and found the door. It waited at the end of the back hall, where the house narrowed between the pantry and the stairwell. Black walnut, iron hinges, skeleton keyhole. Mara set her palm against it. Cold. The rest of the hallway was warm enough to make sweat gather under her blouse. The floorboards held the day's heat. The plaster wall felt almost soft from it, but the door was cold. She tried the knob. Nothing. She pushed with her shoulder. The door did not even complain. Mara stepped back. There is a certain kind of loneliness that makes a person reckless. Not loud reckless, quiet reckless. The kind that says, if nobody in the world is coming for me, then nothing in the world gets to tell me no. Mara put her forehead against the cold wood. "I live here now," she whispered. The door, being a door, said nothing, but the house seemed to hold its breath. That first night, Mara ate beans from the can on the porch steps and watched the ridges turn purple. The hens came close enough to steal crumbs. The bold one, a ragged red bird with a torn comb, hopped onto the bottom step and stared at Mara until Mara laughed. The laugh surprised her so much, she stopped. Audrey's house had not been a place where laughter went unpunished. It felt strange in her throat, rusted, like something found in a drawer. After dark, the hollows filled with sound. Tree frogs, crickets, a whippoorwill calling from somewhere past the Springhouse. Wind moving through cedars with that dry, shivering whisper only cedars make. No Audrey, no dishes slammed into the sink, no voice on the stairs telling Mara she had missed a spot. She dragged a mattress from upstairs, beat the dust out of it, and slept in the front room with the brass key under her pillow. At some hour before dawn, she woke to a sound from the back hall. Not a creak. Old houses creak. Mara knew creaks. Creaks were rafters stretching, boards cooling, nails remembering winter. This was lower, a slow drag, like a chair leg moving across a floor behind a wall. Mara opened her eyes. The room was blue with moonlight. Her heart was beating so hard she felt it in her teeth. The sound came again, from the direction of the walnut door. She did not get up. She told herself it was a possum in the wall, or a branch against the siding, or the house settling into the idea of her. She lay still until morning. At sunrise, she found one egg in the hen house and took it as proof that at least one living thing on the property had accepted the arrangement. The second proof came behind the stove. She was cleaning because cleaning gave her hands work and kept her mind from circling the door. Ash from the firebox, grease from the stove leg, dust so old it came off in gray ropes. Behind the stove, where the iron back sat an inch from the wall, something had been wedged into the gap. Mara worked it loose with a butter knife. A folded piece of paper, stiff from heat, dark along the edges. The handwriting was careful and blocky, the kind men used when they did not write much, but wanted the words to stand straight. If the girl ever comes back, let the door open. If anyone else finds this, leave the room alone. The key is under the place that wakes before the house. H.V. Mara sat on the kitchen floor and read it 4 times. If the girl ever comes back. Not if my daughter, not if Elena. The girl. And the key. Under the place that wakes before the house. She looked out the kitchen window. The sun had just cleared the ridge. Its first light did not touch the porch or the roof. It struck the Springhouse first, a low stone building at the east edge of the yard, where cold water ran beneath a tin lid and moss grew green in the cracks. Mara stood, then sat back down. The paper trembled in her hand. There are moments when a person understands that knowing will cost them something, and they still cannot bear not knowing. Mara folded the note and put it in her pocket. She did not go to the Springhouse. Not yet. That afternoon, Ruth Bledsoe came up the track carrying a covered dish. Ruth was maybe 45, maybe 50. It was hard to tell with women who had spent their lives in sun and work. Her hair was brown, with a white streak over the left temple, pinned tight. She wore a blue cotton dress, sensible shoes, and the expression of a woman who had already decided to be kind and was prepared to defend it. "I saw smoke," she called from the gate. Mara stepped off the porch. "I bought the place." "So Calvin said." The way Ruth said Calvin made it clear she had already spoken to him, and perhaps scolded him. "I brought supper," Ruth said. "Chicken, cornbread, pickled beans. You don't have to invite me in. I can leave it here." "Why?" Ruth blinked. "Why what?" "Why bring it?" For a second, Ruth's face softened so much Mara wished she had not asked. Because a girl moving into Henry Vale's house with one suitcase ought to eat something that saw a stove. Mara looked at the covered dish, then at Ruth. "Thank you." Ruth smiled. "What's your name, honey?" "Mara." Ruth's smile faltered. "Mara what?" "Mara Bell." The world did not stop. The hens scratched. The heat hummed. A horsefly bumped against the porch post. But Ruth Bledsoe went white. Not pale, white. She put one hand on the gate, as if the road had tilted under her. "Bell," she said. "Yes. Jonah Bell's girl?" Mara felt her shoulders tighten. "You knew my father?" Ruth looked at her then, really looked, at Mara's eyes, her cheekbones, the line of her mouth, the shape of her hands. "Oh, Lord," Ruth whispered. "What?" Ruth shook her head once, too quickly. "Nothing. Not today." "What does that mean?" "It means I brought chicken, and I am a coward." Mara stared at her. Ruth pressed the covered dish into Mara's hands. "I'll come tomorrow," she said, "after I've thought how to speak without doing harm." Then she turned and walked back down the track fast, her dress brushing dust from the grass. Mara stood in the yard with warm chicken in her hands and the note in her pocket, feeling the house behind her hold its breath again. That night, a storm came over the ridge. Thunder rolled down the hollows. Rain struck the roof hard enough to find every weak place. Mara put pots under 2 leaks and sat at the kitchen table by lamplight, Ruth's chicken untouched in front of her. She kept hearing Ruth say, "Bell." She kept feeling the cold door under her palm. She kept seeing the words, "If the girl ever comes back." At midnight, the wind slammed something loose against the back wall. Mara stood so fast the chair fell behind her. That was when she heard the sound again. Not wind. Not rain. A slow shift behind the walnut door. Mara picked up the lamp. The hallway looked longer in stormlight. The walnut door stood at the end of it, black and dull and cold-looking, even from 10 feet away. Mara did not touch it, but she spoke to it. "I know there's a key." The thunder cracked over the roof. The lamp flame bent sideways. Mara waited. Nothing answered. In the morning, the world was washed clean. The storm had knocked green leaves out of the trees and scattered them across the yard. The air smelled of wet stone and cedar. Water flashed in the ditch like strips of tin. Mara put on her shoes and walked to the Springhouse. It stood low and square under a leaning sycamore, its stone walls damp, its tin roof shining with the first light. Water ran through it all year, Calvin had said. Cold enough to keep milk 2 days in July, if you set the crock right. The threshold stone was wide, flat, and darker than the others. Mara knelt. Mud soaked her knees. She dug with both hands around the stone until her fingernails filled black. The stone would not move at first. Then it gave a little. She rocked it side to side, breath held, arms shaking. Beneath it was a coffee tin wrapped in oilcloth. Inside the tin, on a scrap of blue flannel, lay a key. Black iron, long stem, simple loop, teeth shaped like a question. Mara knew before she tried it. Of course, it fit. The key was colder than the morning. She carried it back to the house in both hands. At the walnut door, she stopped. For 16 years, that room had been sealed from weather, thieves, dust, neighbors, county men, and whatever forgiveness had tried to get in. Mara slid the key into the lock. It resisted. She turned harder. The lock clicked. It was a small sound, but it seemed to move through the whole house. The door opened inward. The smell that came out was not rot. It was cedar, lavender, paper, and time. The room was small, a bed against one wall with a quilt folded across the foot, a narrow desk, a shelf of books, a cracked mirror, a blue dress hanging from a peg, covered with a cotton sheet, a pair of white gloves laid on the desk as if someone had meant to come back and put them on. Everything was dusted, not recently, but carefully long ago before the door shut. Mara stepped inside and felt at once that she was trespassing and expected. On the wall above the desk was a county fair ribbon from 1955. Second prize, peach preserves. Elena Vale. Mara touched the name with one finger. Elena. On the shelf were books, Willa Cather, a church hymnal, a cookbook with flour still in the crease between 2 pages. A high school annual from 1956. Mara opened it. Elena Vale appeared on page 17. Dark hair to her shoulders, serious eyes, a mouth that looked as if it had learned not to smile too wide unless nobody dangerous was watching. Under her name, someone had written in blue ink, "Best hands in home economics. Worst aim in basketball. Laughs only when she means it." Mara stared. The face was not hers. Not exactly, but it held her in a way Audrey's mirrors never had. In the desk drawer she found a cigar box, tied with a strip of green ribbon. Inside were 5 things. A hospital bracelet, so small Mara almost did not understand it at first. A baby's lock of dark hair folded into wax paper. A church bulletin dated May 12, 1957. A photograph of Jonah Bell standing by the Vale Springhouse, laughing at something outside the frame. A photograph of Elena Vale holding a baby in a white blanket. On the back, in Henry Vale's blocky writing, "Elena and the child, June 1957. She has Jonah's mouth." Mara sat down on the bed. All her life, Audrey Bell had told her only one version. Jonah married Audrey. Mara came along. Jonah died. Audrey sacrificed. There were no other women in the story. No farm. No Elena. No locked room. Mara turned the photograph over again. She has Jonah's mouth. The baby had her fist pressed against her face. The woman holding her looked exhausted and radiant and terrified. Mara made a sound that was almost a laugh, because the room had done something impossible. It had turned her from an inconvenience into evidence. Ruth came before noon. She did not bring food this time. She came with her hat in her hands and guilt on her face. Mara was on the porch step with the photographs beside her. Ruth stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "You opened it," she said. Mara did not answer. Ruth sat beside her, leaving a careful space. "Her name was Elena Vale," Mara said. Ruth closed her eyes. "Yes. She was Henry's daughter." "Yes." "And Jonah Bell." "Yes." Mara looked at Ruth. "Tell me without making it soft." Ruth nodded. So she told it. Jonah Bell and Elena Vale had grown up 3 hollows apart. Same school, same church suppers, same creek where children swam in June. They were not a secret. Everybody knew. Everybody assumed. In the spring of 1956, Jonah asked Henry Vale for permission to marry her. Henry said yes. They planned October because tobacco money would be in and the heat would be gone. Then Elena found out she was pregnant. She wasn't ashamed, Ruth said. Scared, yes, but not ashamed. They were going to marry sooner. Quietly. No fuss. What happened? Audrey. The name landed like a knife set gently on a table. Audrey's father owned the grain elevator, Ruth said. He could give a young man a job, credit, a rented house, a way out of mud. Audrey had wanted Jonah since school, and Audrey's mother believed wanting was the same as deserving if your family had enough money. Mara's fingers closed around the photograph. They bought him. Ruth looked out at the yard. They offered him a future that looked clean. And he took it. Yes. Did Elena know? He told her in July. Ruth swallowed. Jonah married Audrey in November. Elena had you in May. Henry delivered you himself because the bridge was washed out and Doc Sutter couldn't cross the creek. Elena named you Mara before anyone could argue. It was her grandmother's name. Mara looked down. Her name had not come from Audrey. It had not come from nowhere. Someone had chosen it. Someone had held her and said it first. She kept me? For 17 months. The porch seemed to tilt. 17 months? Ruth's voice roughened. She worked at the cafe in Poplar Bluff. Took you with her in a basket when Mrs. Dobbins allowed it. Henry watched you when she couldn't. People talked, because people always talk loudest when kindness would cost them nothing. Elena sat through it. She kept you warm. She kept you fed. She loved you. Then why did she leave me? Ruth's eyes filled. Because she was 20 and broken. Because every Sunday she watched Jonah and Audrey sit together in church while you pulled at Elena's collar. Because men shook Jonah's hand and women looked past her as if you had arrived in her arms by accident. Because grief can make a mother believe the cruelest thing is mercy. Mara could not breathe right. She put me on Audrey's porch. On Jonah's porch, Ruth said softly, with a note pinned inside your coat. Nobody ever showed me the note. Henry thought it said, "You chose the life. Take care of the child." And Jonah took me. Jonah claimed you as his. Audrey didn't want me. No. But she kept me. Because Jonah was alive then, because admitting you existed any other way would have shamed her more than raising you did. After he died, she had no love left to pretend with. Mara picked up the photograph of Elena and the baby. Where did Elena go? Kansas City first, then maybe Wichita. Henry got letters for years, not many, enough to know she was alive. Is she alive now? Ruth was quiet. I don't know. The words opened a new room inside Mara, darker than the locked one. Ruth reached into her pocket and took out a small bundle of envelopes tied with string. Henry gave me these the winter before he died, she said. He said if the girl came back, I was to give them to her. I thought he meant Elena. Maybe he meant you. Mara took them. The first letter was from 1961. Daddy, I found work in a hotel laundry. My hands crack from the lie. I dream about the Springhouse. Do not tell me news of the child unless she is sick or unsafe. I am a coward, I know. But if I hear she is laughing without me, I will break. If I hear she is crying for me, I will break worse. E. The second, from 1966. Daddy, today she would be 9. I bought a hair ribbon in a store and carried it in my pocket all day like a fool. I did not mail it. What address would I use? What right would I have? The third, from 1970, had been returned unopened. The postmark was Kansas City. The stamped words were brutal in their neatness. Not at this address. Henry had written on the envelope in pencil, "No forwarding. Find her if the girl comes." Mara read that line until the letters blurred. Find her if the girl comes. Henry had not left the key for curiosity. He had left instructions. For 16 years, everyone had talked about a locked room. Nobody had understood that the room was not where the secret ended. It was where the search began. The next week did not feel like a week. It felt like a test. Mara repaired what she could. She swept mouse droppings from cabinets. She patched the porch roof with tin Calvin brought out in his truck and pretended he had found behind the store. She learned the red hen would peck her ankle unless fed first. She learned the well pump worked if she pulled twice slow and once hard. She learned the Springhouse water was cold enough to ache in her wrist. At night, she read Elena's letters. There were 12 in all. Not enough to fill the years. Too many to dismiss. In one, Elena wrote about steam rising from laundry vats until the room became a cloud. In another, she wrote about saving $2 from tips and spending it on a photograph booth, then not liking any of the pictures because grief had made her face look like someone else's. In another, she wrote only 3 lines. Daddy, I heard a girl laugh outside the cafe today and turned around so fast I dropped the plate. She was not mine. I do not know what to do with the days. Mara began to understand something she did not want to understand. Leaving had not saved Elena. Staying away had not saved her either. On Wednesday afternoon, Ruth came up the track so fast the hens scattered. She had a folded paper in her hand. My cousin works records in Cape Girardeau, she said before she reached the gate. She found a work card from Kansas City, then a forwarding note, then a married name that didn't last. Elena Vale is in Wichita. Mara stood frozen. Ruth held out the paper. She works at a diner called the Silver Pan. They have a telephone. Mara did not take the paper at first. Once a thing is only a hope, it can live forever. The moment it has a telephone number, it can die in 3 rings. Calvin let them use the phone in the back of the store. He closed the front door early and turned the sign to closed, though everyone in town saw the lights on and knew something was happening. Mara sat on a crate beside the flour sacks. Ruth stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder. Calvin leaned in the doorway, pretending not to listen. The operator connected Wichita. The line clicked. Rang, rang. Then a woman's voice answered. The Silver Pan. Mara's mouth went dry. Hello? The voice was older than the photograph, rougher, tired. But something in it moved through Mara like a match struck in a dark room. Is Elena Vale there? Silence. Then the woman said, very softly, Who is this? Mara closed her eyes. She had imagined 100 sentences. She had practiced none. My name is Mara Bell. On the line, someone dropped something metal. A pan, maybe. A spoon. The woman's breathing changed. Mara heard noise behind her. Diner noise. Plates. Men talking. A bell over a door. Then the woman said, "Say that again." Mara Bell. The line filled with a sound Mara did not understand at first. A breath breaking. "How old are you?" 17. The woman made a small sound, almost pain. "Do you have a little brown mark under your left collarbone?" Mara's hand went to her blouse. No one knew that. Not Audrey, not school nurses, not anyone who would have told a stranger in Wichita. "Yes," Mara whispered. The woman on the phone began to cry. Not loudly, like someone trying to do it without being caught. "Mama?" Mara said. The word came out before she gave it permission. Calvin turned away. Ruth's hand tightened on Mara's shoulder. On the other end, Elena Vale said, "I thought if I ever heard you say that, I would die from it." Mara pressed the receiver to her ear with both hands. "Did you want me?" The question had lived in her so long it came out flat. No drama. Just the bone of it. Elena answered immediately. "More than my own breath." Mara bent forward over the crate. "Then why didn't you come?" There was a long silence. Then Elena said, "Because I believed the door I closed was kinder than the room I kept open. I was wrong." The line crackled. Someone in Wichita called Elena's name. She ignored them. "Where are you?" Elena asked. "At the Vale place." The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Struck. "You're in my father's house?" "My house now." Elena let out a breath that sounded like the end of a long illness. "Is the room still there?" "Yes." "Did he keep it?" "Yes." Elena cried then, and did not try to hide it. 2 days later, a bus from Wichita stopped in Birch Creek at 4:12 in the afternoon. Mara stood outside the general store, in a blue dress she had found in Elena's room, and altered by hand, because it had been too long in the waist. Ruth stood beside her. Calvin stood in the doorway. 3 people pretended to pass by for unrelated reasons, and failed. The bus door opened. A woman stepped down carrying one brown suitcase. She was 38, though the years on her face had not been gentle. Dark hair pinned back, work shoes, a plain gray dress, hands red at the knuckles from hot water and soap. She looked at the store, at Ruth, at Calvin, then at Mara. Nobody moved. The woman put one hand to her mouth. Mara had thought she would run. She did not. She walked. So did Elena. They met in the dust between the bus and the porch of the general store like 2 people crossing a river from opposite banks, each afraid the other might vanish before they reached the middle. Up close, Eleanor smelled faintly of coffee and fryer grease and lavender soap. Mara saw the line of her own mouth on the woman's face. Eleanor lifted one hand, stopped before touching. "May I?" she asked. That question broke Mara more than any embrace could have. Audrey had touched without asking. To correct, to move, to take. Eleanor asked. Mara nodded. Eleanor's fingers touched her cheek, then her hair. Then Eleanor pulled her in. Mara did not cry at first. She stood stiff in her mother's arms, not because she did not want them, but because wanting had become a dangerous skill in Audrey Bell's house. Then Elena whispered, I know, baby. Take your time." And Mara came apart. Not loudly, not beautifully, just honestly. All the years did not leave her. Years do not do that. They are not birds. They do not fly out because someone opens a door. But something in Mara unlocked. Some small locked room in her chest found its key. They went to the Vale place before supper. Elena sat in Calvin's truck beside Mara and did not speak when the roof came into view. At the yard, she stepped down slowly. The hens watched from the lilacs. The Springhouse shone white in late sun. Elena looked at the porch, the chimney, the south wall where honeysuckle had climbed wild, and then she looked at the walnut door, visible through the open front hall. She stopped. "I thought he would burn it," she said. "Henry?" "My room, after I left. He kept it. I didn't deserve that." Mara looked at her. "Maybe he wasn't keeping it because you deserved it. Maybe he was keeping it because he loved you." Elena closed her eyes. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and coffee and evening heat. They walked down the back hall together. At the walnut door, Elena put her hand on the wood. "It used to stick in winter," she said. "Daddy shaved the bottom twice and cursed it both times." Mara smiled despite herself. "You remember the door?" Elena's eyes stayed on the wood. "I remember the day he hung it." "Why did he?" "Because after I left you, I told him to throw everything out. I wrote it in a letter. I said if he kept my room, I would never come home. He wrote back that a father did not obey grief when grief was giving foolish orders. Then he built a better door." The house was very quiet. Mara took the iron key from her pocket. She handed it to Elena. Elena shook her head. "No, you opened it. It belongs to you now." Mara closed her fingers around the key. Then she opened the door. The room was golden with late light. Elena stood on the threshold and did not enter. She looked at the bed, the quilt, the blue dress missing from its peg because Mara was wearing it, the ribbon, the desk, the photographs laid in a row. Her knees weakened. Ruth caught her from behind. Elena covered her face with both hands. "I'm sorry," she said. Mara did not ask who she was speaking to. Henry. The room. The girl she had been. The daughter beside her. All of them. Mara stepped inside and took the cigar box from the desk. She opened it and lifted the hospital bracelet, the lock of hair, the photograph. Then she gave them to Elena. "I need to know something," Mara said. Elena lowered her hands. "Anything. When you put me on that porch, did you look back?" Elena's mouth trembled. "Yes." Mara waited. "I drove to the end of the street. I stopped. I turned around. I came back and parked across from the house. Jonah opened the door. He picked you up. You were crying. He held you against his shoulder. I watched until you stopped crying." Mara could barely speak. "Then you left." Then Audrey came to the door. Elena's face hardened with memory. She looked down the street and saw my truck. She knew. I knew she knew. Jonah didn't. He was looking at you. Audrey looked at me, and she smiled. Mara felt cold. "Why didn't you take me back?" "Because Jonah had you in his arms. Because I'd convinced myself blood and a roof and a father were more than I could give. Because I was young enough to think one terrible choice could still be clean if I made it for the right reason." Elena held the photograph to her chest. It was not clean. It just stayed terrible. Mara looked at the room Henry had kept. For the first time she understood the door. It had not been built to hide shame. It had been built to protect a place where love had survived being mishandled by everyone who touched it. That night, they ate at the kitchen table. Ruth fried potatoes. Calvin brought a ham wrapped in butcher paper and said it was expiring, which was a lie so poor nobody honored it by challenging him. Eleanor made biscuits without measuring and cried when she found her mother's rolling pin still in the drawer. After supper, Ruth and Calvin left before dark. The house settled around two women who had been strangers that morning, and something larger than strangers by night. Mara and Elena sat on the porch. The red hen slept on the rail with her head tucked under one wing. The ridges went blue. A single star appeared over the Springhouse. "I can't fix what I did," Elena said. "No." "I can't be your mother backward." "No." Elena nodded, a hard truth accepted cleanly. "I can be here tomorrow." Mara looked at her. "And after?" "If you let me." Mara listened to the cedars move in the dark. All her life, adults had turned love into a debt she could never pay. A roof, a meal, a pair of shoes, a name. Eleanor offered none of that. Only tomorrow, only after, only the work of staying. Mara stood and went inside. For a moment, Eleanor thought she had said too much. Then Mara came back, carrying the quilt from the locked room. It was clean now, washed and dried in the sun. Along one edge, a square had come loose. The stitches had rotted where time had worried them thin. Mara handed Eleanor a needle. "Can you sew?" Eleanor laughed once through tears. "Badly." "Good," Mara said. "So can I." They sat under the porch lamp and stitched the old square back into place, crooked, not perfect, not restored. Held. At dawn, Mara woke before Elena and walked to the back hall. The walnut door stood open. Morning light reached past it for the first time in 16 years and lay across the floorboards of the small room. The room did not look haunted now. It looked used. A chair pulled out. A quilt folded badly. A photograph moved from the desk to the windowsill, where the light could find it. Mara stood in the hallway and touched the door one last time. It was not cold, not warm exactly, just wood. The house around her made a soft sound as the sun climbed over the ridge. A board easing, a pipe ticking, a sleeping woman breathing in the next room. For 16 years, people had said Henry Vale's house was holding its breath. Maybe they were right, but breath is not meant to be held forever. Sometimes it waits behind a locked door. Sometimes it waits in a letter. Sometimes it waits in a diner 4 states away, washing cups and counting birthdays no one else remembers. And sometimes it waits for a 17-year-old girl with $53 and nowhere to sleep, to choose the road that leads toward it. Mara went to the kitchen. Eleanor was already there, standing at the stove in yesterday's gray dress, hair loose around her face, trying to make coffee in a pot that had not forgiven anyone since 1968. She looked up, uncertain for 1 second. Then Mara said, "Morning?" Eleanor smiled, not too wide, only enough. "Morning." Outside, the hens started complaining like the world belonged to them. Maybe it did. Mara opened the back door and let in the ridge air. The house breathed. And this time, no one closed it again.